Enter the Novice by Topher Chambers. It took me a few days of hiking and catching rides on the backs of scooters to get to the outskirts of the village. The trip took me through the jungle and wide open areas that reminded me that despite the turmoil that this region had underwent, it is still somewhat unspoiled. People go about doing what they need to do in order to survive. However, they also have a depth of character that stands out in this modern world. I mean, driving down the road in a car, we passed people pulling carts with oxen, sometimes by hand. Culturally speaking, there seems to be a dichotomy of old and new worlds clashing in this small country. The dynamic nature of the country lends more credence that there would be some variant cultural practices in a remote village somewhere. It is still a beautiful country. The sights are amazing. The people of Cambodia are some of the nicest people. At least they have been to me. I guess I can't really make any other judgment than that. Upon reaching the village of Adelamost, deep in the mountains of Cambodia, I made a contact with Jamala, a local man who had spent time in the city of Phnom Penh for some time. Jamala brought me into the central village and showed me the normal life of the villagers and tried to answer some of the small questions that I had about the lives of the people around me. It wasn't too long before I excused myself from my new friend Jamala and set off to the side and just watched the passing of the day. That evening, Jamala sat down with me and helped me understand what I observed that afternoon. The everyday life seemed to be no different from the everyday life of any other village in the region. It was hard for me to understand why they kept themselves as secluded as they do, and how they have remained as unnoticed as long as they have. Jamala laughed. It isn't hard for us to go into the city since we are the same people that live there. We are no different, and the people we interact with don't need to know which village we live in. In that sense, we live as we please. We don't need to tell them our beliefs, and I'm sure they don't want to know. As for the passing of the day, we have to live life like everyone else. We have the same needs and almost the same environment to survive in. I mean, he is right, of course. They really do not stand out from the other Khmer people in the area. If it wasn't for the chance observance of a ritual a year ago, the world would not have known about them. If you would like to try to understand more about our village, you may try to speak with our sage, Rollo. He should be able to help you out more than I can. Origins of the species. Rollo was an educated man. He traveled from his village deep into the unknown reaches to the city at a young age. Here he was schooled in all primary schoolings available, and took on at a later date theological training. He came back to his village after years of learning to teach and lead his people. As a sage and as a healer, his duty to his people has been his only concern since his return. I sat down with Rollo, the cherub-faced old man, to learn as much as I could about the old ways of the village. I figured that those beliefs would have fallen into disuse from the centuries that stood between their foundation and today. So by asking, I meant no real offense. From the reaction of the others in the room, it was obvious that this request was a bit unorthodox. I couldn't have known if it was from the lack of interest shown by earlier researchers or if they held their religious origins as so sacred as to be secretive of the knowledge. Rollo looked at the onlookers with an understanding smile. So long was his gaze on them that it was a bit unnerving when he finally turned his attention back to me. With a stern glare that was mixed with compassion, what I can only relate as true love, he asked why I was looking for this knowledge. Knowledge, he said, is the only truth that we can ever know. It is this knowledge that binds us to each other, and it is this knowledge that keeps us separate from the outside world. If I impart this understanding to you and you use it poorly, then I have committed great treason to my people. With that, he motioned to all in attendance that evening. These are my concerns. So tell me, what is your intention with this knowledge? Will you use it to enlighten others or use it to enslave my people's minds or even worse, their persons as well? It was with earnest that he spoke. So much so that I found myself unable to look away from his humble but stern face. Meekly I said, enlightenment, mine and any of those who can learn from you as I have. He smiled, nodded and waved to dismiss the masses that had started to congregate around the room. For you to truly understand the ways of this village, you must first understand the origins of the whole. Our ancestors gave us an awareness of the beginning of times that no longer exist in the world outside this land. We are protective of it, and through it, we survived eons. It has been said that our people were among the first to awaken with true intelligence in this world, and we strive to hold to that. Many others who woke have forgotten the knowledge of the first times and tried to supplant the great knowledge with that of their own making. I suppose that is the way the grand architect had planned it from the beginning, but we wish to keep our truth alive in this world. It is said that man's existence is one of the cosmos. We have connections that bind us to the universe itself, not just Earth. Magic and religion are merged into a grand tapestry that stretches throughout the untold regions of the void. Understanding all of it comes with understanding of our connections. What men call the real world is only smoke and illusion. The true world lies within what they call smoke and illusion. It is the other place, call it a reality, or just another step of consciousness that truly exists. He stood and moved to a more secluded section of the room, motioning for me to follow. As we were moving, he looked back. Your scientists are focusing on answering questions of the mundane world. We do not waste our attentions to this end. We know enough of our place in this life to know where we should focus our intentions. We moved from the main common room to a small alcove. There we sat on soft floor pillows and a novice brought us a drink. Rollo looked up from his cup and continued. Let me start at the beginning, as it were. The ancients say that outside the realms of our heavens lies an unknowable void. Due to the complex and nearly incomprehensible nature of the universe before this point, very little can be understood. This unknowable void, the ancients tell us, has a consciousness of its own. As the void developed, so did its need for something more. This void, to cull what need that arose, brought into existence in this void a large blue-green planet. On this planet, he brought into existence all manner of life. Some religions might call this an Eden, so to speak. This world was perfect. It is from this, the universal designer, which all concepts of an eternal being could have sprung from. This being could be considered God or universal consciousness or any other creator being presented by modern religions. In this ancient utopia, the original creation of man, the real created beings, existed. These beings had pure souls, independent of the void. These Obutu, as the ancients call them, existed in harmony with the world and the creator. But as their power grew, and with it the knowledge they had over their world, the more turmoil and hardship they encountered, they fractioned themselves off and separated themselves from the world, this Eden, as it were. The ancients say that consumption of power and greed drove a wedge so deep in the Obutu that they ended up destroying the world that they so loved. To the creator's dismay, the world it carefully created to share this vastness with exploded. It carried parts of it to the outer reaches of the void. In the wake of this destruction, the universe was formed. In the beginning, it was cold and dark and had no real form, save scattered debris from the large blue-green planet. It was this way for some time, and the creator was left with only the spirits of the Obutu. They loved the creator, and they served him in this void, faithfully. After a while, the creator found use for this debris. He molded the rocks and gases and wisps of creation that littered this space into new worlds and new life. He populated the worlds with all manner of creatures. And once again, sentient life forms existed in this new space. But this time, the creator would be part of it, to hopefully understand why his first people came to the end that they did. Rollo shifted in his seat and put down his cup. All sentient life in the universe that the creator built is a facet of the universal. These facets should be considered energy, or what we call the soul. Eastern religions claim that once they move beyond the mortal coil, they join with the universal consciousness. Throughout history, there have been many different cultures who state that connections could be made to the universal, and with different methods. The fact that we recognize that we are all facets of the great architect makes us realize that we are all connected. Placing his hands in mine, he looked at me as if asking if I understood. So what you're saying is that we're all connected by the creator, and through that connection we help the creator experience life inside his creation? Exactly, Rollo smiled. It is through us that he will understand the downfall of his earlier creations, and as the ancients hoped, be able to recreate a people that will not follow the same path to their destruction. He handed me a small biscuit, looked at me again. It is getting late in the day, so come back tomorrow and we will continue this journey. Let the knowledge you learn today seep into your life and provide you some understanding of the world in which you seek. I stayed at Jamala's for 3 weeks, talking to Rollo, watching everyone in the village go about their routines during the day, spending the nights with Jamal and his wife, talking about their day. At the end of those 3 weeks, I thanked Rollo and Jamala and made arrangements to come back the next month. I had a lot of research to do if I was going to understand everything that I was told. Unraveling the fabric of reality. I started to have my doubts about some of the concepts I'd heard. I spent the next month thinking over the things that I'd been told, not sure how I was going to approach Rollo about deeper concepts of the religious aspects of his people. He seemed to genuinely want to help with my research, but just how far is he willing to help? These are the things that kept coming across my mind as I made my way back up those dirt roads toward the village. The car stopped at the familiar ox path that I'd used to walk to the village last time, and I got out. It was a half a mile down this path to the village, so I shouldered my bags and headed that way. In the village, nothing had changed. Everyone was going about their normal routines. I didn't immediately go to Jamala's house, but I sat on a stump and ate my lunch watching the children play in the village muddle about their day. That was where Rollo found me, mouthful of food and laughing as the children chased a chicken around the houses. "Charles, you're back so soon." Startled, I almost choked on my sandwich. Clearing my mouth, I looked up and greeted my new friend. He asked if I had met with Jamala yet, and I affirmed that I was on my way and that I just wanted to take a rest for a moment and eat lunch before I met up with my host. He smiled and told me to stop by his house when I was settled, and Jamala was more than welcome to accompany if he wasn't doing anything. I said that I would and told him I would talk with him before too long and gathered my belongings and headed to my home for the next few weeks. I took my stuff to Jamala's house and he showed me to my mat. After I settled in, I told Jamala that we both had been invited to Rollo's. He motioned towards the back of the house and said that he was really busy right now, but for me to go and talk with Rollo. I bid him good day and walked down the dusty path to Rollo's house. Rollo greeted me in the usual manner, a respectful bow and a hug. He invited me in and told me to make myself at home. We talked for hours about the daily life of his people. Then as night fell, we bid our goodbyes and I started out the door. Before I could make it completely out of his house, Rollo shouted that I was to come over tomorrow afternoon and we would talk more about Antilathian beliefs. That was a good sign, I thought. That next day, I went back over to Rollo's expecting some more mundane conversation. At first, I was not disappointed. We talked about the rice fields and the daily work that the people did to survive and how the days are getting on. It was after a while that I noticed an odd way in which he described the days going by. At first, I chalked it up to a local custom, but the frequency in which he spoke of this started me to think that the intentional world they live sees time a different way. Tentatively, I made inquiry as to why he refers to Orobu guiding them to the next day. Was it something that all believe, or was it a figure of speech? Rollo smiled and laughed to himself quietly and said, "We believe that time is motionless, without beginning or end. That it has motion and is the cause of change is an illusion. Men begin to think of time only to measure what they call change, yet that too could be an illusion. Orobu, the spirit of wisdom and foresight, guides us from one day to the next. Without its guidance, we would not transcend the day and be stuck in the moment. If we were forsaken by the spirit, we would not see the sundown. We would be stuck in the day until Orobu came back and led us into the next day." Apparently, my interest was written all over my face, because Rollo smiled again and looked at me in that usual way. The way he looked at me when he wanted me to ask the question he knew I wanted to ask. "So, if you anger the spirit, then time stops? Time is only an illusion. What stops is our progression through the cycle of life. It is the spirit that takes us through the process. Everything that was, is, and will be exists all at the same time. It is Orobu that guides our souls from one instance of life to the next. We would be stuck in the moment and never know where we were intended to go. There is an old story told by my ancestors of a warrior who needed to travel many miles to tell of an invasion by a group of other warriors. This warrior needed to alert his village before they were overran. He was 2 days behind the advancing warriors, and the village was 4 days from where he was at. Therefore, he pled with Orobu to not let him move on to the next day in order for him to overtake the advancing army. He ran until he reached the village to warn them and then placed offerings to the Orobu to let him see the next day. But because of his actions and the actions of the spirit Orobu, the village was saved." I didn't know what to make of this story, so I chalked it up to a parable for being faithful to the spirits. But the idea made me start to think harder about the daily beliefs of the people and how those concepts interact with their daily life. The culture seems to look, at least from what I see, at the world as if it forgot what its purpose was. The fast-paced world that flitters by them doesn't interest them, but now I'm starting to see why. They don't want to get into the rat race that is Western culture. The fact that they place time as a subject-dependent object, a concept that stands alone and can be manipulated, seemed intriguing. However, if I was going to understand more of this, I need to get back to basics. I spent the rest of my visit talking to Jamala's family and Rollo about the intricacies of village life. This helped me flush out the rest of the village life that I was missing in my observations. Seeing the beliefs present in the customs of the villagers was a lot harder than I first thought. However, I had a better foothold on the people now than I did when I first started. magic, and dreams. I spent that time working on understanding the culture from a basic point of view. I stopped looking at them as a subgroup of the Cambodian people and more as a separate and completely different type of people. While they have similarities to the other peoples of Cambodia, they're special. For instance, they place a very high value on family, even unto the point of adopting a person who had been mistreated and alienated by their family. This is how they are. After I returned from a stint back in America, I was staying in Phnom Penh doing some background research on the area. It was during this time that I started to have disturbing dreams. It started in a rather mundane way. From what I remember, as most of my recollections of my dreams are fragmented and half-formed, they started to revolve around terrible and horrific imagery. The last dream I'd had before leaving for the village was one that was the most horrific. The sense of numbness slowly crept away. I began to slowly start to hear muffled voices in what sounded like a distant room. It was like sorrowful sobs and heartfelt goodbyes. Groggily, I tried to rouse myself and found my limbs still lethargic and my voice choked off. The only thing that I could do was lay where I was at and listen. My brain was swimming in some drug-induced haze and my mind was unable to correlate what was all going on. The world, or rather the darkness, spun around me. All was cold, hard, and dark. The haze started to lift slowly. With this newfound clarity came a claustrophobic feeling. Consciousness came after the voices stopped. The walls felt like they had closed in and I was locked in an unknowable darkness. A finger moved, then a hand. I could get a foot to wiggle. Movement was my only thought at this time. My throat choked out a muffled groan and the sound washed back over me in a disgustingly close reverberation. I tried to raise my eyelids and wasn't sure that it really worked. No matter what I did, I was in darkness. Slowly I moved my head and could feel the walls closing in. I moved up a hand and felt the low-hung ceiling. All this information flooded my senses as the true disparity of my situation finally started to sink in. My breathing became labored, and I kept telling myself to stay calm. Someone has to find me. This must be a mistake. They will find me. Then I heard it. A low rumbling from the outside world. What was that? An avalanche? Stones moving? Had they really sealed me in whatever tomb I was now in? No, I was fine. This must be some practical joke. They will come and get me soon, and they will all have a laugh at my expense. Hours seemed to tick by. Slowly, my fate seemed sealed. Frantically, I clawed at the stone cover in some final desperate act. Pain flooded my senses, and I could feel wetness dripping down my arms. I will admit, I panicked and kicked and screamed and clawed at inside my new prison. Then, gasping for breath, I started to fade into darkness. In a last frantic gasp, I sat up. I was lying in my bed at the hotel. I sat on the end of my bed and just breathed. It was just a dream. Only a dream. I just sat there with sweat dripping from my forehead and dried blood caked in my fingernails. I kept this to myself for as long as I could. When I arrived at the village and met with Jamala and went about what had become a normal routine, it felt good that I was back in a comfortable pace of life and reveled in the conversations I was having with Rollo and Jamala's family. A few days passed, and I had made further steps into an understanding of village life. The dreams had stopped, and I thought that they must have reflected how much I had been accustomed to life here in the village. I was happy with the way things were going until one night it seemed to start all over again. I was just getting ready to go to sleep when I had lain down and started to process the events of the day. I could swear that the curtain that separated my sleeping area had moved, or someone was walking through my room. This was not new, as Jamala or his wife frequently checked on me sometimes. But as I tried to turn over and see what was going on in the room, I found myself paralyzed. Not able to move even a little bit. Panic seized me and I fought to rouse myself. I couldn't even open my eyes to see who was in the room with me. Talking was just as impossible. This was the same feeling I had when I dreamt of the crypt. Over the background noise of nature, I could just make out the sound of someone shaking some kind of drink. What? Hello? Who's there? Is all I could think, but wasn't able to put into words. It seemed like I had to concentrate really hard to provoke a physical reaction at all. This person, whoever it was, leaned over the mat beside me, and I could feel the weight shift on the mattress. I swear that I even felt a physical hand placed on my shoulder, as if someone was trying to wake me. I tried to scream, move, and do something. However, nothing would come. The visitor made an audible noise and opened its drink and moved off the bed. It seemed to disappear back into the rest of the house with a low belch. Terrified, I finally was able to choke out, "Hello?" I could move, sluggishly at first, but move nonetheless. I rolled over and scanned the room. Nothing out of the ordinary. My door didn't even seem to have been touched. I didn't hear the curtain move again. Jamala and his wife came in after I had yelled loudly to see what the matter was. I got up and went through the entire house. However, found nothing to show that someone else had been there. Jamal and his wife said that they had been asleep and didn't hear anything. No one was there, and as far as they could see, no one had been there. Fear ripped through me as I tried to figure out what had happened. I finally broke down and told them what had been troubling me. At first, I thought that it was just an artifact what had become my normal routine of constant travel, but as I discussed these patterns with Jamala and his wife, I found they were starting to react to what I was saying with what I could only categorize as fear. That next day, I was dragged over to Rollo's by Jamala. Unfortunately, I was asked to sit outside while Jamala and Rollo talked. They were discussing something in low tones, and I was not really able to hear much of the conversation. I knew they were talking about me, but I had no idea what they were so worried about. Dreams, even bad dreams, are just fragments of our conscious lives extruding into our subconscious. That, at least, what I had understood from my cultural upbringing. Rollo came out of his house and looked me over. "Are you feeling okay?" "I feel fine." "Why? Is there something the matter?" He asked me about my dreams and how long have I been having them. So I related all the dreams that I could remember. He just sat there nodding and asking little questions like, "Did you feel this?" Or "Did you hear things like that?" When I was done relating these dreams, Rollo just looked at me again and said that he had done me a great disservice. "I have given you knowledge, in fact, specifically the knowledge you came here to learn. But in doing so, I think that I must have angered someone in or around this village. The only way that I could see to undo this disservice I have done to you is to initiate you further into this understanding. Even if it will anger this person more, it needs to be done. I guess that is their own end that has brought us unto this." "What's the matter? Is there some kind of reason in your culture for why I'm having nightmares?" "Come into my house. We have much work to do. I will answer your questions when we are alone. There is much to discuss with your new predicament." I entered his house and found Jamala sitting in the main room. As Rollo and I entered, Jamala got up and left us to our discussions. After Rollo made sure we were alone, he asked me to sit down. He looked at me and asked how much I understood of what he has told me, mainly concerning the origin, myths, and concepts of time. I confessed that I understood only really on a rudimentary level, and that is mainly why I'm still doing my research. He just smiled, but it was somewhat a sad smile. "Well, Charles, you will have a lot more to try to understand. I have placed you in danger, and I'm really sorry about that. For this to work, you must trust me. Do what I say and trust that I am telling you the truth. We will make arrangements for you to construct a house here in the village, near to mine as much as possible." Before we started anything, he handed me a knotted handkerchief. I could tell he understood my perplexed look and assured me that as long as I had the handkerchief, I would be safe. Before he walked into the other room, he gave me one last caveat, never to untie the cloth. As he came back into the room with a lit candle, sat down in front of me and told me to sit still while he cleansed me from whatever my nightmarish visitor had put upon me. I sat there as he chanted in some odd manner and bathed me in the light of the candle. He asked, apparently, that the spirit of Orubu to give me the sight to see the dangers that I have and will encounter. After he had cleansed me of whatever ill intent that had been placed upon me, we sat and talked. Rollo explained to me that from the description that Jamal and I had related to him, sounded like a visit by a local witch. He wasn't sure. It could have been another sage looking to find my true motives or was trying to scare me away. Whatever the case, he assured me that when we finished tonight, I would be safe. He sat me down and made me comfortable. It wasn't that comfort that I had when we were discussing abstract or cultural ideas, but a strange, altering comfort that you can't put your finger on it. He started slowly, and as he said, at the beginning, "I am a sage. I use my connections to the Creator and the spirits in order to help my village. The magic that I do is for the betterment of the people. It is my voice that I add to the chorus of the village to invoke the spirits to hear our cries. I am the human extension of the spirit Lobo, who carries our wishes to the spirits who dwell in their dream realms. While I'm the messenger for our voices, it is the spirits that empower our totems and sigils to do what it is we need them to do. For example, if I pray and meditate to the spirit Arushu, through Lobo, to empower a sigil that I placed on your head to cure you, then the spirit will give that power to the mark to do so. But I do so not on a waking level, but on the level of the spirits. People have simple charms and talismans that prevent or ward off bad effects, but it is only an initiate who can contact the spirits to empower objects with the power. This does not weaken their objects, but gives more power to those of the sage. This is the way of the initiation. This is an initiation in which you are going to take for your own safety. In this, you must learn to sleep in order to communicate with the spirits awake. For once you sleep the right way, the doors to the realms are open to you, but that is just the first step. Once you are able to find the doors to the realms, then you must know the way through the lands of the spirits and the lands of the dead. Only by knowing them and those who dwell there are you able to secure your own safety. For a clever witch, it would be easy to trick and ruin a feeble dreamer. You will start your sleep initiation when your new house is constructed. We will cover that process when it is time. But first, you need to know the spirits and their charges. You will learn more of these, but this will allow you an understanding of what you're going to undergo. In the world of the spirits, there are 13. These are spirits that empower our totems and sigils. These are the chief amongst the spirits. They are the full rulers over their domains in the dreamlands. In those domains, other spirits dwell and serve the greater spirits. Each spirit has a realm in which they control and can imbue power. Shubu, chief sage of the spirits, is the spiritual anchor in which all sages on this plane are descended from. His court of good spirits include Urushu, the hunter and the scout of the Obutus; Iristu, the spirit of rivers, love, fertility; Orubu, the spirit of wisdom, divination, and foresight. Just as there are good spirits, those who wish well the souls of man, there are those who are darker and more malevolent. The evil spirits consist of Bereth Sek, the spirit of blood and anger; Niratu, the spirit of death and ruin; Shadismal, the spirit of fear and loathing; Dodisimal, the spirit of darkness and demons. These darker spirits are not useless to a well-learned sage, for they offer a way to protect yourself from an adversary they would use them against you. But tread not unto these domains with caution, because in that direction lies becoming a witch. Once you have set foot on that path, it is a hard way to leave. There are great spirits who resemble the more ambivalent aspects of nature. They are neither good nor evil. They exist in both and can be invoked for either good or ill. Arushu, the spirit of disease and illness, can be invoked to cure or infect a person. This is who I'm afraid might have touched you in your sleep. Derutu, the spirit of iron, war, and labor, holds sway over the tide of battle and mechanisms of war. Dituru, the keeper of the underworld gates, judges those souls that enter the underworld, Tanis. Lobo, the messenger between human and divine, spirit of crossroads, is the messenger that carries our earthbound voices to the ears of the spirits. She is important because if an uninitiated person beseeches Lobo, the voice can be heard without being initiated into the dreaming. And lastly, but very important in this village, is Turuntu, the spirit of the earth, mother of the harvest. It is of her blessings that we survive, with great rice fields. I sat there for a moment and let the understanding sink in. I finally got a chance to hear a piece of the Antilathian religion, but at what price? I know that there were other anthropologists attacked by witches, and if they survived, they either backed away from the situation or used the practices of the people they studied to counter their attacks. I just sat there and wondered, was this my chance to understand more of the religion? Alternatively, am I walking a dark path that will only lead me into further troubles? This internal monologue seemed to last forever in uncertain silence. It was Rollo that broke the spell by saying, "We need to move with some haste. Jamala was organizing the village to help you build the house, so until it is built, you will stay here. This is to make sure that you are safe, and that nobody else will be put in danger, as I have put you in danger." That night I slept in Rollo's house. The next day, building had begun on my new quarters. It wasn't very long that it was built, dedicated to spirits, and a shrine set up inside. Thought it would be nice to have a quiet place to put my research in order. The first night, 2 days after talking to Rollo about moving, I slept in my own place. After a fitful night of sleep where strange visions circled me as I lay in bed, not sure if I was asleep or not, I sat down and talked to Rollo about the Dreamlands. He started slow since he could tell that I was still shaken by the last night's events. The dream world has 2 levels, the overworld, which is called the Talorium, and the underworld called Tanis. A talented sage or witch can travel in both, the upper and the lower world. The Talorium is the house of the spirits. This is where you go in the dreamscape to seek guidance from a spirit. After practice and understanding, you may gain enough power to travel to the land of the dead, the underworld Tanis, where you may speak and seek guidance from the souls of the departed. This, of course, is only possible if they haven't moved on to merge with the Creator. Slowly nodding, I asked, "Is this how I got attacked? Because I'm sleeping? I'm more vulnerable?" "Yes, you are open to attack while you sleep. because your sleeping mind is open to the dreamlands. The only thing that keeps you from entering the dreamlands is the fact that you have not been initiated. Can someone who isn't initiated enter the dreamlands by accident? I mean, if they can harm me in some way while I sleep, and I'm not initiated, then can't I enter the dreamlands unknowingly? Or are they using the dreamlands to find me and invade my dreams? Dreamers enter the dreamlands by accident all the time. They're not trained to know how they got there, nor are they trained to know that they are there in the first place. Have you ever had dreams that were so vivid and clear that you swear it was real? That is when you know you have entered the dreamlands. The reason you couldn't see them in detail was you hadn't entered the realms. You were just on the periphery. This is when you are most vulnerable. It is possible during travels in the dreamscapes to encounter ghosts of those who have passed, who are lost. The gifted sage will guide them to Tanis in order for them to move on. If a sage encounters the ghost of a witch who has bartered their way out of judgment, the sage must invoke the spirit Shubu to send the witch to Tartus, or the witch will be free to harm others as it sees fit. I can only describe to you the dreamscape of Shubu as all golden and lovely. It blazed in the sunset, with walls, temples, colonnades, and arched bridges of veined marble, silver basin fountains of prismatic spray, and broad squares and perfumed gardens, wide streets marching between delicate trees and blossom-laden urns, ivory statues, and gleaming rows, while on steep northbound slopes climbed tiers of red roofs and old peat gables harboring little lanes of grassy cobbles. It was a fever of the spirits, a fanfare of cyclopean trumpets, and a clash of immortal cymbals. Each of the spirits hold domain over an area of the dream world. Their area reflects not only aspects of their nature, but the dreamers who have traveled there and contributed to the place. Where the good spirits held sway, vast and beautiful vistas are open for the dreamer. The darker spirits hold sway in rancor, and their lands reflect that. Each land is populated with a race of people who only live in the dreamscapes. These are the Namrods. They're the builders of the great scapes. Here they flourish or suffer because of their lords, the spirits and their offspring. Now, I can remember some pretty vivid dreams. I've always stuck those in with bad pasta or a chili dog that didn't agree with me. But Rollo was adamant that I had walked in the dreamlands and didn't realize it. It was hard for me to actually believe. I know I've had nightmares over the past few weeks, but some outside person or thing wasn't responsible. It couldn't be. Witches and dreams. It was after a few days of odd sleep schedules and routines of meditation, I finally sat down with Rollo and asked about the witch that had supposedly attacked me. I had more questions than it seemed Rollo had been willing to answer until then. Even as I asked them that day, he seemed to want to take his time and give me the background for why I was supposed to follow his teachings. He sat down and explained that I was learning to sleep. By sleeping at certain times, waking at certain times, meditation, and then naps shortly after started to bring to mind other concepts to my mind. It seemed to me that I was taking on the aspects of lucid dreaming techniques and self-awareness. But Rollo was adamant that this was not what was happening. To him, I was connecting to my subconscious, by which I would be able to use it to travel to the dreamlands. There I, according to him, could find the witch that made me a target. Witchcraft is the opposite of a sage's magic. Practitioner of witchcraft also has to be initiated into the practice, but it under the tutorage of another witch. The magic connections of the Antalathians are used for all things perverse in the eyes of the people. Unlike the sage, where the voices of the people are heard by the spirits, only the voice of the witch is told. It is considered very evil. They see that their connection to the Creator allows for the unbridled access to the power of the Creator. They can enter the underworld and torment the souls of those who pass for information about their living relatives. The information they will use to excise whatever they want from the living. They make their connections to the Creator through spirits like the sages, but they invoke the evil side of each spirit, where a sage will invoke Arushu to power a symbol or sigil to cure or prevent disease. A witch will invoke the power to give disease. A witch can also invoke Tituru to allow them not to be judged after they die and enter the underworld. This allows their ghosts to return to the land of the living to continue their works. To refrain from slipping into the path of the witch, one must remember the adage, do not what you want, but do what you need to do and nothing else. In this, you will align your will with a higher power, and through this alignment you will be guided by that higher power to a higher path. Temptations will be plentiful, but you will do good not to heed them and listen to your guide. So this witch that attacked me was a selfish person who used the powers of the sage for personal reasons. Rollo apparently knew who this was or had an idea how powerful they were because he was pushing me towards self-reliance faster than I thought I should. Even as he did this, it seemed that he was still unwilling to tell me more than he needed. So, what happens to this witch that has attacked me? Do I just tell them, him or her or whatever, that I know that they're doing and to stop? Is there something that I'm supposed to do to them, myself, to make sure that it doesn't happen again? You need to learn to sleep first. Do not worry about the witch right now. After you learn to sleep and can use what you learn, then you can think about the witch. Following Rollo's directions for the almost 6 days, I had a breakthrough. Though I'm not sure if it was really something I did, or if it was just the stories and instructions of Rollo that influenced my dreams. It was almost like his stories. I was standing at the foot of a giant staircase. The stairway wound sightlessly round and around, up and down, a fathomless spiral of steep and slippery stairs. So worn and narrow were the steps, and so greasy with the ooze of inner earth, that the climber never quite knew when to expect a breathless fall and hurtling down to the ultimate pits. I ascended the stone stairway and found myself at the edge of a vast terrain. It didn't appear to be any land that I had seen in my travels. I was surrounded by strange flora and fauna, and there appeared to be a vast stone wall in the distance. I was there only momentarily, but the fact that I knew I was dreaming and could look intentionally at my own body led me to believe that this is what Rollo had described. Rollo seemed somewhat pleased to hear of my dreams, though over the past few days it seemed that he'd become more physically drained. It showed in his face. He was happy that I was progressing in a positive way, but I think that I wasn't moving fast enough to remedy the situation. Sickness, faith, and sorcery. It was late August when a local child became ill. I'd been practicing the dream travel for almost 6 months by then. I think I might have become very adept at moving from a sleeping state into the lands of the spirits, and Rollo had already started to talk to me about learning the next step in becoming a sage. Chantria, a local woman, came to Rollo's house to get him to help her daughter. Of course, Rollo agreed. This would be a great time to show you another part of being a sage. It takes more than beseeching the spirits in their own world. It takes the ability to understand our world, as well as the world of the spirits. Follow me and I will show you how to prepare a ritual. This will be a good first step. After telling the woman to prepare her daughter for the ritual, he led me into the woods to look for a specific tree. He called it yellow wood. He said that the bark of the tree, when ground into a powder and applied to a paste which is eaten and then used to mark a sigil on the recipient's forehead, would cure most ailments that children get around the village. It is important to know what the world around us can do, and the more I talked to Rollo, the more I started to see that the sage understood more of his environment than I originally thought. Rollo made sure to tell me that sorcerers use the powers of nature without the use of dreaming to evoke magic. They are not necessarily evil, but sages feel they aren't using the power correctly. Rollo chuckled. Well, the sorcerers feel we are weak by needing to dream travel in order to work with magic, but everyone has their own opinion. In that sense, I am sure the witch thinks they are right too. We returned to his house with the bark of the yellowwood tree and some other plants that Rollo said he needed for his own work. He made a powder out of the bark and left it in the mortar. He looked up at me and smiled. It is time you see the last pot. You will have time to learn the plants, but you need to see the animals. We went back into the village and acquired a chicken. He found a good-sized chicken, one that wouldn't take away from the community, but would still make a good sacrifice to the spirits. He took the chicken back to his house and prepared the rest of the materials, like incense burners and incense, bowls, candles, a mirror, and a ceremonial knife. After his sage toolkit was gathered, we left to go to Chantria's home, where the child was prepared for the ritual. He looked at the woman and told her that she had to really believe. If she didn't, her voice wouldn't support him in his work. The little girl was lying on a mat in the main room of the house, dressed in white linen. Rollo and I entered and took our places, and since I had no real knowledge of the ritual, I sat to the side and just watched. Rollo took the chicken and said a prayer over it, then slit its throat. After draining the blood into the bowl, he gave the chicken to the woman and told her to prepare it for the child. The blood was mixed with sweet milk and the powder of the yellow tree. As he did, he explained to me that each of these was a part of nature. They all represent life. The sweet milk is what we are suckled on. The blood is our bond to our body, and the plant is the life of the earth. Each has their own purpose. The child was given the mixture to drink, and then Rollo inscribed a sigil on her forehead with the same mixture. Rollo chanted a prayer to the spirit Lobo to hear his words and to take his message to Arushu, and he washed her body in the smoke of the incense. After he fully bathed her, he placed his hand on the sigil and meditated for some time. When he finished, he mopped his brow and told her mother to not touch the sigil until it wore off naturally. We walked out of the house together and we talked about what happened. He told me that she should start to feel better in the next few days. If not, then it is more than just an illness. Until then, we need to start you on the vegetation. I need to be honest with you, Rollo. I have to leave in a week. I will be back in a month. Can I continue when I come back? If you are away from here, you should be fine. I will try to continue to protect you, but you need to come back and finish your training. I can only do what I can. I owe you that much since it was I that put you in danger." The next few days, the little girl started to get better. Everything was going good, and she was back outside playing with the other children. 3 days before I was scheduled to head back, I was told that the child had died. Rollo said that the mother reported the child had screamed in her sleep and stopped breathing. He looked really upset. "I should have known. I was paying attention to protecting you from this witch. I couldn't protect the child from the witch. I'm going to the mountains for a few days. If I am not back before you leave, I wish you a good journey. Now I need to prepare. Be safe." Rollo left. I didn't see him until the end of my visit. While I was packing my new house, getting ready for the hike to the road, Rollo came in and told me not to worry anymore. I was safe. "I am safe? I don't have to worry about the witch on my travels?" "That is correct. Go in peace. And when you return, we can focus on the rest of your training. That, of course, is if you still wish." "So, what about the witch? What did you do?" "I solved the problem once and for all. The witch will no longer kill innocent children to punish me for my dealings. It is done." I just nodded. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. This peaceful man just went into the mountains and killed someone, all because he thought they were a witch. It frankly scared me more than anything I had seen before. I told him I could tell he was tired, and I made arrangements to be picked up in an hour. As I walked out with him, I thanked him for his teachings. I didn't want to show any hint that I could see the bloody roll on his backpack.